Musings podcast with Fairbairn and Russell. Hello and welcome to the Market Musings podcast, where today we're joined by two guests. That's Tony Hamilton, the CEO of Georgina Energy, and Mark Wallace, the Executive Finance Director of Georgina Energy. And of course, Georgina is going to be IPOing soon, looking to exploit hydrogen and helium and also natural gas projects from existing wells. So welcome to you both. I know, Tony, we have spoken before on an interview, but welcome both to Tony and Mark. How are you both doing?
Very well, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much for joining us. Of course, Kenny is joining us as well from Bonnie, Scotland. Kenny, how are you?
Yeah, welcome, guys. Great to have you on. I hope it's a bit warmer where you guys are. It is in Scotland at the moment. It's a bit chilly, but at least it's dry, so that's an added bonus.
Good. It's always nice that it's dry. Where are you guys calling from, Tony and Mark?
London.
London. Okay. Well, so they were all over today. So thank you very much for joining us. So what we like to do on the Musings podcast, really we like to go back to find all about the people within the business, because you can have great projects, but really I think investors like to know the people who are driving those projects to actually getting the value out of the ground and into the share price. And it's the people and what they've learned along their journey and their drive really to drive to success. So I mean, if I start with you, Tony, maybe we can sort of have a bit of a chat. Where did you sort of start in life? Where was your early career? How did you end up falling into sort of the exploration mining sector and also PLCs?
I suppose it goes right back to, obviously I was born in Western Australia.
Yeah.
And if you're born in Western Australia, you either go into the mining industry or you go into the farming industry, one of the two.
Mm-hmm.
I had family in both elements. In fact, my father is a Scotsman, born in Edinburgh, and my mother is Sicilian, born in a place called Ficaro in Sicily.
Okay.
So I've got a very typically Australian European background. And after university, I joined a company called Grants Patch Mining, and I was their CFO. And we actually did the largest gold tailings retreatment operation when we treated 6 million tonnes of tailings from the old Sons of Gaulia gold mine.
Okay.
And that sort of got me the taste of what I was about to embark on. And as a consequence of that and meeting a number of very high profile people over the years, I've pretty much worked everywhere. So I've worked in the US, in the Gulf of Mexico. I've worked in almost all of Africa, Australia. I've done diamonds in Zimbabwe and North America. In fact, I suppose if you like, one of my claims to fame is that I was accredited to bringing Zimbabwe and North America's first commercial diamond mines into production. And we actually took the company to the largest independent diamond producer in the world at the height. I've recommissioned gold mines. I've done copper or multi-metal assets in Romania, diamonds in Angola, oil and gas in Angola. So I've had a pretty varied and wide background, almost predominantly in the mining industry and the energy industry. And then there was a little diversion back in, I think, about 2004 when I floated a company in Australia called Sprintex, which was actually a Scottish invention for a twin-screw supercharger, which that company still listed on the ASX.
Okay.
So I've pretty much, I think, done it all.
Well, yeah, that's a whole career in mining. Effectively, it's interesting. You say you're born in Western Australia and your options are farming or mining, but you actually went straight out of university into a CFO role then. So pretty high first job, really.
In those days, accountant by qualification,
Okay.
I had some really good contacts. I'd actually originally, just prior to accepting that job, I'd worked for a company called Edward L. Bateman, Vanek and Lurie, and they were building the Argyle diamond mine, and I was the financial accountant there. So I'd sort of I'd cut my teeth in that industry pretty much straight away. So yeah, and I mean it wasn't really that high flying a position at that point.
Yeah.
Simply, just looking
Yeah,
after financial affairs.
it's interesting, your Scottish connection and obviously a Scottish invention as well. And it actually brought something into my mind. I know it's a bit left field, but I think it was Winston Churchill that said that only the Greeks surpass the Scots in their contribution to mankind. They seem to be, since we've done this after these podcasts, that everybody seems to have a Scottish or indeed an Irish connection. It's very strange how for such small nations we seem to infiltrate every part of the world, especially Australia. I mean, my sister-in-law's over in Australia and obviously she's Scottish as well. So yeah, we seem to get everywhere, so we do. It must be.
I'm
It must be in our blood.
Kenneth, I'm particularly proud of my Scottish heritage. I mean, I've got the family name Hamilton, and the other side of the family name is Craig. And one of my family members actually played rugby for Scotland. So, so when the Wallabies aren't doing very well, which is quite often these days, I'm a Scottish supporter. And of course, then on the other side, my family is Italian, and they are very much in the market gardening and that kind of business. So, and it's fairly atypical of my generation that the bulk of my friends and have got family parents who came from Europe and emigrated. I mean, just remember back then there was what they called Australia the £5 POM, and the Australian government was paying for people to come out for princely sum of £5 and emigrate to Australia.
Yeah, and bizarrely enough, they're actually starting that campaign, a very similar one just now. I've seen a few articles that they're trying to attract. I'd say more it's professional people, doctors, nurses, architects, that kind of line of people to come to Australia. So, no, it's a massive country. I mean, I don't think people appreciate the size of it, and it's so underpopulated as well. I mean, don't quote me on this. I think it's only like 250,000 people in the Northern Territory or something. It's this massive.
Well, Western Australia, where we are based, it's just under 3 million people, and it's about, I believe, 10 times the size of the UK.
Yep.
So we've got plenty of space.
Yep.
We're also hosting probably some of the best oil, gas, gold, and also uranium deposits and iron ore, of course, in the world. The country, Australia itself, is an incredibly resource-rich nation, and its heritage in terms of its mining capability stems right back when English, Irish and Scottish miners were coming across at the beginning of the century when the gold rush was on.
Yep. Yeah, it's actually quite interesting. I've got a big experience at looking at some of the mineral mapping systems in Australia, and you look at some of these old shafts or mines, and they've all got names of Scottish towns or Irish towns or indeed English towns as well. It's quite bizarre. Yeah. It's interesting as well, but no, Australia is definitely open for business, and obviously its location with China nearby as well just makes it a perfect match. And obviously we'll come on to the Georgina story later on, but obviously, well, Mark, you're here as well, so it'll be great to hear your journey in life as well, and if you want to go that far back as your childhood, where you were born and what it was like growing up, etc. That'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am actually one of those £10 POMs that Tony was referring to. His family were £5 poms, so I was a little bit more expensive. So I've been going to and fro between England and Australia for be about 45 years from when I was a child. We were one of those English, Northeast English families that could never quite settle down. So went to and fro for many decades. Finally settled in Perth, where I went to university, studied accounting and economics, and came straight back to London, where I worked for the likes of Standard Chartered and Credit Lyonnais in their capital markets departments. Worked there for quite some years, and then my wife and I decided to go back to Australia, where there was a lot of obviously a lot of resources being iron ore and oil and gas. So we decided to go back to Australia and work in that area. So when I was in Australia, I worked in engineering, a bit of property development, traded some iron ore, and also worked extensively for drilling companies. And I was CFO of several drilling companies within Australia, and we had operations in the likes of Mauritania, Guinea, Sub-Sahara, South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, all the fantastic places in the world, as well as China and throughout Australia. And it wasn't until about just approximately 8 to 10 years ago that Tony and I got together and started looking at several projects, including oil and gas. And here we are today with a fantastic gas project in Australia, in the Northern Territory in Western Australia, looking to raise money and make some money for our shareholders.
Okay, so you both really came from an accounting background then, but Tony went almost straight into mining, whereas Mark, you were doing a few different things with different companies, and then actually got into mining, but through the drilling side of it, actually running or working for drilling companies. And what was that like, working for drilling companies? I mean, of course, they're used all the time in mining and exploration, and we hear a lot these days that it's difficult to find drillers, probably because of a lack of underinvestment in the space for such a long period of time. But I mean, you must have worked with a lot of very interesting companies over the years, and potentially, hopefully, some quite significant or interesting geological areas or discoveries. So, what was your kind of journey like with working with these drillers?
Well, certainly working in drilling gives you a wide exposure to many commodities, and also not only commodities, but also in very wide and different geological or locational places where work has to be undertaken. So the drilling services that I was involved in included the likes of gas through Australia, even iron ore, gold, and also rare earths. And some of the most successful drilling ventures that I was involved in was in the likes of China, South Africa, Tanzania, but also throughout Western Australia, undertaking various drilling operations across a wide area. Some of the drilling activities that we undertook included up to 126 rigs at any one time, scattered throughout the world. And this also includes above ground drilling for the likes of iron ore, but also underground drilling. And that took me as far as Canada and even Saudi Arabia. There was quite a lot of activity there. So it's certainly been a fantastic education for me over the years, and I've been able to apply that to the activities that we're undertaking now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely clear listening to both of you. You know, you've got a combined, I'm going to say 75 years. I think I might even be generous with that. It might even be more years than that experience between you. So it's definitely it's a good partnership, and you guys have been working together, as you said, for the last sort of 10 years at least. I'm going to pose this question to sort of both of you now, and we tend to ask everybody that comes on, and some of the guys are really keen to talk about their successes, but a lot of people don't want to talk about failures as well. But I like people to talk about failures, because you learn more from failures. You know, you can have a success and you can, fist pump, whatever, let's go and do it again. But I think a failure kind of refocuses your mind. It's almost like a kick in the balls sometimes. And sometimes you need that in life just to get that drive and that hunger back in your belly. So maybe I'll start with yourself, Tony. What was your biggest success, or the sort of proudest sort of commercial moment in your career? And then, if on the flip side, if you can give something that didn't work out, why it didn't work out, and how you addressed it going forward.
I think, well, my biggest success are my children, because they've all been successful.
Good answer.
In terms of, because as they say, your greatest legacy you can leave behind is not a plaque over the door of a library that someone walks under every day and can't remember who you are. It's your children. Your legacy is your children.
Yep.
So in terms of commercial success, obviously commissioning Zimbabwe and North America's first commercial diamond mines, bringing a company from nothing to the largest independent diamond producer in the world, producing the 5th largest polished diamond in America with the Star of Colorado. Basically, the commissioning and redeveloping gas wells in the Gulf of Mexico with 28 million cubic feet of gas a day, floating Sprintex, which was a Scottish technology for a twin-screw supercharger, which had been around for a long time and no one had ever managed to get that done. And then, of course, there's a variety of other things that have been, I classify them as successes, basically just where production. Georgina is a success simply because when we started this in 2019, I don't think too many people even knew much about helium, let alone hydrogen. And to get it where we have got it and on the verge of a name listing, I think that's another thing that, is probably will chalk up to a success. And then, I've had some success in motorsport, motor racing, which was quite good. So, yeah, in terms of failures, I've had, like most people, I am completely imperfect, and I've had a couple of beauties. I suppose my single greatest failure was I actually made a very possibly the single greatest mistake in my life was I provided a personal guarantee for a underwriting for Sprintex on a capital raising, and it didn't go well, and I was made bankrupt in 2013. So that's about 10 years ago. I would do the same again because the company's still listed and operating, but in order for it to continue, it needed me to make a commitment, and ultimately it didn't work out, and I paid the price. Like they say, you learn from your mistakes, and that was certainly one of them, and probably my single greatest mistake.
It doesn't really get any simpler, any clearer than that. So, in life you make mistakes, but the trick to it is to learn by your mistakes and make sure you don't do it again.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, I've had a few kickings in my career, but it always seemed to come back. And I'm not saying you reinvent yourself, but you just try and do something differently or more efficiently, and you get that desire and hunger back in your belly. And I was in a similar position in 2008, 2009. I wasn't quite bankrupt, but I'd taken a spanking from the markets, and it was looking pretty grim, and I probably disappeared for sort of 2 or 3 years and kind of licked my wounds and almost fell out with investing and trading and etc. But obviously come back, 5 or 6 years ago and thought, what can I do differently? I've still got a lot to offer. So yeah, it's sometimes. I mean, I think if you meet somebody and said, I've never had a failure, I wouldn't call them a liar to their face, but everybody has failures. You can't get through your life without any failures. I mean, I'm sure that Elon Musk has plenty of failures, and he's not scared
right. Well, he was close to bankruptcy, wasn't he? I think he was sleeping on different couches, wasn't he, at various points in his life to try and keep some of the companies afloat. But yeah, in bankruptcy, we were talking to a private investor, weren't we, Kenny? Maybe 18 months or so ago, who went through that. He was declared bankrupt. He said it was a pretty tough time, and there are lots of restrictions that come with that. But he continued to work hard and learned from those mistakes, and now I think he's doing pretty all right with his investing journey. But I mean, I guess that it must hurt quite a lot, Tony, to be in that situation. You don't want to be there again. Would you say that it was you learned certain things that would then help you in your situation now with Georgina in terms of money management or due diligence, that kind of thing?
I think two things. One was that as a consequence of me providing a personal guarantee, Sprintex got the money it needed and continued on its way. And so, if you like, I'd made the ultimate sacrifice for my shareholders. I certainly learned a lesson. If I could say one thing, you certainly learn who your friends are. The other thing is that, look, at the end of the day, one of my I suppose my failings is that I believe in things to the point where I'm prepared to support them no matter what. As simple as that. I mean, Mark and I have personally invested a significant amount of money in Georgina, of our own money. And so therefore, I suppose it taught me one lesson, and that is that when people are looking to invest in a company, they need to know that the people that are behind it are committed to it and invested in it by whatever means. And I think that's critically important. And I think, yes, it was a very tough time, but, thankfully my wife and my family got me through it. There were times when I was very, very much doubting what I'd done. But, someone said to me a while back, would you do it again? And I said, the short answer is yes. And I just hope for a different outcome.
Yeah, no, that was extremely honest and nice. You were able to talk about that in such detail. And obviously, Mark, you're not going to get away scot-free.
No, that's fine.
It'd be great
for me personally, similarly to Tony, your family is always your greatest asset. That's the rock and infrastructure upon which you build your life upon. So, in terms of that, families always come first for me. But I have to say, I've never had any soul destroying issues in terms of failures. I'm going to be honest, and I'm not going to try and fish one out of my mind when really I've had some fantastic mentors during my life, and some of them were family and some of them were professional, and
the people that I've been able to go to before I, particularly when I was younger, before I made any major decisions. And that's really held me in good stead to date. And hopefully I can do the same for others, particularly my family and many work colleagues. Hopefully I can set an example and do exactly the same for those. So I'm very fortunate not to have had any major failures at all. Certainly not financially.
Yeah, so obviously you guys have worked together for about 10 years or more. I mean, when did you first come together to work on the Georgina idea? I think you said 2019, but if you can maybe give us a backstory of how it came together.
So Mark and I really came together in 2016.
Yep.
And we had an idea about what we wanted to do. And it took us a considerable amount of time to put the plans in place. And then it took a chance meeting with our technical director, a gentleman called John Hugh. And John is the former chairman and founding director of Central Petroleum. And a lot of what Georgina stands for and what we're doing as a consequence of what essentially I'd call his proprietary information. Now, he's been trying to get someone to do what we're doing now for 20 years because he had a very, very good understanding of the geology and the structure and what was going on in Western Australia and the Northern Territory for that matter. So when Mark and I had a chance meeting with him, and ultimately we listened to what he had to say, the thing that struck us both was just how common sense it was. So the first thing we did was we went and approached a couple of brokers in Australia. Absolutely zero interest. Helium, I think the most common thing we got from everybody was, oh, that's what they put in party balloons. Hydrogen wasn't even on the agenda.
Yep.
So after numerous contacts, and we're pretty well connected with people in Australia in the broking community, we came to London at the suggestion of someone that we knew. And he basically said, look, guys, this is the sort of thing you should take to London. Now, as I explained, I've got a British passport. Mark's got a British passport. So we jumped on a flight and we came to London. And the first thing we did was we created Georgina Energy, PLC. Now, Georgina is a PLC. It's a public company. It was formed in 2019 and it's operated as a PLC since then. So if you go to Companies House, you'll find all of our filings, all our audited accounts, all our corporate and regulatory filings, everything's there.
Yep.
And we've operated it as a PLC, albeit unlisted, since 2019. So this isn't something where we just, jumped out of the bush somewhere and decided to form a company in the BVI or out of some other jurisdiction. No, we've been doing this since 2019. And so the backstory to that is that then the other thing that we did was started to put our own money in. We put up the first £50,000 you're required to put up when you form a PLC and paid up capital.
Yep.
And subsequent to that, we've put about £1.2 million in direct equity into the company. And to date, we've lent it £460,000 in operating capital. So for that entire time, the company's been operating since the day we incorporated.
Impressive. I mean, investors love skin in the game. I mean, there's two different types of skin in the game. There's you get directors that have got skin in the game, but actually when you strip back and look at the history, you find that they've been awarded that skin in the game. It might be in lieu of salary, or it may just be an award of shares. But I like the fact that these guys have put, a lot of dollars or a lot of pounds into this project. So I mean that's a big tick for me. I always look for skin in the game, and I prefer people that are put in a lot of money. And clearly, Tony, you mentioned you were bankrupt in 2013, but by 2019, you're putting significant chunks of cash into this business. So, hats off to you for turning that around. I suppose another question I've got as well is, who had the assets before you guys took them on? What was the story there? How did you get hold of these assets? Because obviously there's been work done in the past. These have been drilled and there's resources there, etc.
The curious, so again, we'll sort of go back to you heard the old analogy, you can't see the wood for the trees.
Yep.
So in the case of Western Australia and the Northern Territory, there are a significant number of oil wells drilled from the 1960s right through until the mid-late 1980s that were drilling for oil that never hit oil, that were then plugged and abandoned. And these are sizable companies, Shell, BP, Pan Continental, News Corp, no less, all drilling for oil. And when they didn't hit oil, they shut the wells in, and then ultimately the licenses were either abandoned or handed back to the state. In the case of Hussar, which is one of our licenses, that was owned by the state, and we applied for that because it wasn't owned by anyone but the state. But it had on it the wells that we specifically had information about. In the case of Mount Winter, that was held by an AIM-listed company called Mossman Oil and Gas.
Yep.
And so we approached Mossman and we explained what we wanted to do. And we did a farming joint venture where we have 75%. In the case of Hussar, we own 100%. And so the history behind them is exactly the same. I think last time I spoke to someone, there's about 126 drilled and abandoned oil wells across WA and the Northern Territory that have been drilled many, many years ago. The keys to what we're doing is that our wells, when they were drilled and plugged and abandoned, intersected gas in both wells. So do you guys know the story, of course, in simple terms about Qatar? The analogy is that when they originally drilled for oil in Qatar and didn't hit it, they ultimately handed Qatar over to the Qataris because all it produced was a bit of gas. I mean, Qatar is per head of population, the richest country on the planet, thanks to the gas. So it's back to the very simple process that wells that were drilled for purpose, in this case oil, didn't encounter oil. And I mean, bear in mind, both wells were drilled in 1982. So back then, gas wouldn't have been a high priority. Oil, of course, was.
What if you can tell us a little bit about the market for hydrogen and both helium? I mean, hydrogen, I think, is coming a bit more into focus because of the sort of the hydrogen fuel cell, perhaps the next version of the electric vehicle, the next transport method. But what are we looking at here? You said they explained very well that these wells were drilled in sort of 1982, looking for oil, didn't encounter it, so they were effectively capped. But now you've got an opportunity here with the hydrogen and helium. So what opportunity is there on a global scale?
So in terms of the helium in particular, the helium market's a fairly opaque market. Back in the way the helium price used to be set was in the US back in the last, and it was done via an auction system in the US, whereby the helium price would be set for that year as a benchmark, and then that would be utilised up and down the curve by then wholesalers and retailers. That auctioneering system was actually abandoned back in 2018 as the US government put helium on the critical elements list, which meant that the helium produced in the US could not be exported anymore. And subsequently, the same has happened globally because now countries, governments, and producers have actually realized how important helium is and the shortage that there is globally in terms of producing. So the last price that was set in the US was 28 cents a cubic foot. Now, it's our understanding, and again, it is an opaque market, the pricing of helium has actually doubled, but it's a matched bargaining system. So it's basically over the counter.
Mm-hmm.
So now helium and its wide uses are such that it's used in MRI machines for medical purposes. It's used in the military. It's used to cool data rooms, large data rooms for the likes of Amazon and those types of companies. So its application is increasing exponentially. So what we see is a fantastic opportunity for Georgina to, first of all, enter the market. And we want to be at least the third largest supplier of helium globally. And we think that we can do that with the assets that we have.
Okay, so the third largest provider of helium globally, that's a big ambition. You think that's realistic?
Absolutely. The assets that we have great potential. Obviously, we do need to do some drilling, re-entering and developing the wells that we already have under our license. So that is definitely our target.
Okay.
The hydrogen market in itself has come into the forefront because of the hydrogen fuel cell and its applications, both industrial, automotive. There's a variety of different elements to it. And you've got people like Toyota and Hyundai producing hydrogen-propelled cars. You've also got the situation that you've got numerous companies out there trying to artificially manufacture hydrogen. And in simple terms, it requires water and an awful lot of electricity, a huge amount of energy. And the problem they presently have is that the cost of producing that is hugely prohibitive to making it an economic or viable solution. That's where we come in. So we're producing hydrogen and helium as a byproduct of natural gas. So depending on how you want to classify it, we would be producing essentially gold or blue hydrogen, which is effectively a byproduct, as I said. So it's a natural resource. It is renewable. Takes a long time, of course, but the beauty of that is that our cost of production for producing the hydrogen is very, very low because it's naturally occurring. And you've got the situation where the applications for hydrogen, and when I say the applications, I mean the applications where they can use an economically viable supply of cheap hydrogen, makes it quite a very, very good alternative. Even possibly, and there are people out there that think far beyond the EV revolution that's currently occurring, and ultimately using hydrogen as a method of producing energy because of its essentially the single biggest byproduct is water.
Yeah, so obviously you guys are on an IPO journey at the moment and you are hopefully coming to AIM,
You're right,
hopefully in the next several weeks. I mean, could you offer? I know it's quite hard sometimes with the regulations. You can't say too much. Could you maybe give us a snapshot of where you're at in this journey at the moment?
Well, in terms of really where we're at, our Nomad is Allenby. Our legal advisors are Memory Crystal. The admission document is pretty much complete. The only thing we're trying to close in on now is the funding, and we're feverishly marketing out there, marketing to all who will listen, and ultimately, at some point, hopefully fairly soon, we'll close the financing. We're looking to raise around £5 million, which would mean that primarily we will not then need to come back to the market to drill Hussar initially. I think once we've confirmed and we know the amount or quantum that we've raised, then I believe the Nomad will then issue the Schedule 1, which will go up on the RNS, and then I believe it's a mandatory 10-day period has to pass, and then 3 days later we'll be, on the assumption we raise the money, we'll be admitted.
Yeah, so you're not too far from at the end of the process. You're talking maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks tops, maybe. And hopefully
The challenge, Kenneth and Mark, is that the markets are very. I suppose the word I should use is fickle, because of the amount of variation that's going on globally all over the place, virtually in every market. And but having said that, the green, clean energy, carbon neutral sector is still very strong because it's relevant, and we sort of fall into that zone. So we're getting a good response. We're getting a very positive response. We just need to sort of get to the finish line, and I'm hoping it won't take 5 weeks, but certainly we would hope that it would be concluded in the next few weeks for certain.
Yeah, and obviously we spoke about it earlier on. Helium and hydrogen. It's there's not that many companies out there that specialise in this, and obviously the one that springs to mind is Helium One. I think they're based out of Africa from memory. What sort of market cap are you guys intending to come to the market at? And obviously these guys are quite a chunky market cap. Could you not compare the two companies, but just give a flavour of you guys, what you have got, compared to Helium One, what they've got at the moment and where they're at in the journey?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so if we can do a comparison between Helium One and really they're probably a better comparable to Georgina Energy. So, well, first of all, Georgina Energy is operating in Australia, which is it's a fairly low risk jurisdiction, where I'm not sure any asset has been seized by the Australian government, and I'm certainly not saying that happens in Tanzania, but there is a certain amount of risk inherent operating in Africa. And then we have the amount of assets that Georgina Energy have. We have 3 commodities, 303 billion cubic feet of helium, 308 billion cubic feet of hydrogen. This is all 2U or P50. And in terms of natural gas, 2.95 trillion feet of gas that is part of our commodities. So also Australia, we have extensive infrastructure, and the government is actually spending $110 billion within Australia on infrastructure, including pipelines and hubs
and one pipeline in particular runs directly between Mount Winter and Hussar. So in terms of de-risking our asset, it certainly helps us in that regard. So market cap for Helium One, and Helium One's only a one commodity company. Its market cap runs at around £40 million, in and around that. They are a pure explorer, as far as we're aware, and whereas Georgina Energy are a well development company, we don't have to go out and try and find our asset. We actually know where we're going to drill, and what depth we're going to drill, and what we expect to actually extract. So we're coming to market post money at IPO of in and around about £10.5 million on a £5 million raise. Our IPO price is 2p, and for every share subscribed for, the investors get half a warrant, or one warrant for every 2 shares subscribed for. So we think that's a fairly good value proposition for anybody wanting to come in.
Yeah, it certainly seems very attractive doing the comparisons. I mean, what would be? I mean, you talked about drilling. I think it was Mount Hussar. You mentioned earlier on. What would be the roadmap after IPO? You know, what's the exploration plans? Or the use of the £5 million, shall we say? That's a better way of putting it.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I'm quite keen to get an idea of the work program, considering the duo that you've got with your experience there, Tony, in bringing the gas in Mexico online, and Mark, of course, with the actual drilling experience as well. So, I mean, I guess you have plans, and keen to kind of know what they will be once you can actually get active.
Well, we're certainly not exploring, put it that way. We actually know exactly where we'll be putting the rig, and that is to, in the first 6 months, we'll be getting our permitting, and that might take about 3 months. And during that period, we'll also be undertaking the engineering of the hole, and finishing off any Indigenous engagement that we need to undertake to bring the rig to site. We will also be obviously engaging with the drilling company to mobilise the site, and there'll be some site preparation to undertake as well prior to the rig getting there. But just talking about your point, Kenny, in terms of what exploration activities that we'll be undertaking. We won't be undertaking any exploration activities. We'll actually bring the rig to site, re-enter the well that we have on site, and drill into the cavity, and move directly into the heavy tree in order to expose the gas. That's exactly what we'll be doing.
And
we know.
Sorry.
We know exactly where we're going to be drilling. We're not going to be on site trying to find where it is that we wish to put the rig in order to drill the hole to begin with. We won't be needing to do that.
And obviously, in the last 40 years since it was last drilled, technology's probably, came on, massively in this particular field. So I'm assuming there's.
In the case of Mount Winter, we are going to the holes were drilled in 1982 to a depth of 2,650 metres. At Hussar, it was drilled to a depth of 2,040 metres, again in 1982. In this case, the heavy tree formation, which is where we want to intersect, In the case of Mount Winter, it's 750 metres from the bottom of the hole to the heavy tree formation. In the case of Hussar, it's 1,160 metres to the heavy tree formation. That's from the bottom of the existing hole. The point I make is, though, that there's been 4 holes that have penetrated the heavy tree formation in the region. All 4 of those holes have intersected helium and hydrogen and natural gas. And in most cases, the helium content's been between 6 and 12%. And in the case of hydrogen, as high as 11%. And it's been drilled by highly creditable tier 1 companies. In the case of Ducas, which was 11% hydrogen, that was drilled by Santos. So essentially, all we're looking to do is penetrate that heavy tree formation, which sits below the gas horizon that we presently have in both of our wells.
Excellent. And how quickly do you think you'll get an idea then, once you actually do get the drill down there to see what is remaining? How quickly do you think you'll be able to get an idea of what is there? And, well, what are the next steps? Would it be to announce a potential resource, or would it be to actually just get the flows going, get the production going?
So primarily in the first instance, it'll be to obviously re-enter the well and bring the gas to surface, and then have the gas analysed. And once we've had the gas analysed and we know what we've got, and bear in mind, when the natural gas comes to surface, it's going to come up with helium, hydrogen, nitrogen, methane, bitumen, a bit of water, all sorts of different things. So primarily the first part of our process would be to determine what the mix of the gas is and what the concentrations are. Once we've done that, essentially, then we can move towards the determination of a resource for the resource estimate, which would be done. And then the other element to that is that a key element of our platform is we are going to sell the gas at the wellhead. So we are deliberately not going to engage in having to go out and raise $200 or $300 million to fund all the infrastructure above ground for the gas. We are going to sell our gas at the wellhead, and hence we've already executed an MOU for an offtake agreement with a group who've said that they will commit to providing the capital to do that. And that's what we intend to do, because primarily our experience collectively over the years has been a junior company can make a significant discovery, but when it comes to trying to raise significant amounts of money to build the plant or the refinery and all the other elements that go with it, it's almost impossible. Ultimately, the junior ends up either selling the project to a major company or losing the project to a major company or a financing group. So we don't want to do that.
Okay, excellent. Well, I look forward to seeing some of the results when the IPO is ahead, and of course you can actually get out there and actually start testing that gas. That's when we really get an idea of what's there. And as you say, if it's looking good, sell it at the wellhead, and you've already got some of the agreements in place with potential offtake partners there. So that's excellent. I think that pretty much covers everything. We're coming up almost at an hour of chatting here. So I think that we've covered off a lot of things there. Unless, Ken, you have any final questions or thoughts?
No, I was just going to, obviously there'll be people listening to this in the next couple of days, guys. Maybe worth just mentioning, who your broker is and how people can get involved in the IPO if they are interested.
Our broker is Optiva Securities.
Yep.
And they've obviously got an active website. If they want to contact Optiva, please do so.
Perfect, and you guys are approachable as well. You'll be happy to speak to any investors. Should we get any emails or anything like that from this podcast?
Yeah.
Perfect.
No problem. And obviously, I assume people can also speak direct to Stockbox.
Yeah. We might get some feedback, whether it's DMs on Twitter or maybe people commenting on the tweets, so we can pass on the information. But no, I think Mark, I'm good. If you've got anything.
No, I think that's good. I'm pleased we had that discussion. It's nice to know about the directors and your background there. Certainly does seem to set you up well for what you're doing with Georgina. So excellent. Looking forward to, as I say, seeing how things develop, get that IPO over the line, and let's see how things go. But thank you very much, both of you, for your time, Tony Hamilton and Mark Wallace from Georgina Energy. Thank you for listening to another podcast from Market Musings with Fairbairn and Russell. Tune in next time.